Okay, it is 5:02. We will call this special meeting of the Charter Township Board to order on Monday, November 18th. Calling the meeting to order, and we'll begin with Pledge of the Allegiance, if you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, Ann?
Bartlett.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
Walters.
Present.
S. Cortade.
Here.
M. Cortade. And Matt Cook.
Here.
Okay, this is a special,
Oh, and
here.
Friend, sorry.
This is a special meeting, and we do have the agenda in front of us, which includes I didn't print myself the newest agenda, but it does include the minutes from the last board meeting, as well as the approval of the agenda. So is there any conflict with anything on the agenda?
Are you looking for approval of those draft minutes or just that they're here?
Yeah, I was going to approve them, because technically we're supposed to do the very next meeting, so.
I'm just making sure I understood for minutes.
Sure. Did everyone get a chance to review those draft minutes? Okay. Did you say yes or no? No? Okay. We'll just take a minute and go ahead and review them. But while we do that, I will ask if there's a conflict of interest. Okay, hearing none, is there approval of the agenda with the last meeting's board minutes and the fiscal year 2025 draft budget?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, is there support?
Or,
Okay, a motion by Bartlett and support by Lyle to approve the agenda with the two items. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, with that, we will open it up for public comment. If there's any public who would like to make comment, they're welcome to come to the podium and address the board. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the the business before the township board. The first order of business is the November 12th board meeting, and those minutes you have in front of you. Do we need another minute or two to take a look at them?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, is there a motion? I'll move to approve the.
Sorry.
I'll move to approve the November 12th, 2024 minutes of the draft as presented. Is there support?
or,
Okay, motion by Friend, support by Lyle or Bartlett.
I gave it to Bartlett.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? All right, great. With that, we will move on to the fiscal year 2025 draft budget. You have the packets in your mailbox, and you'll see that we have talked about this briefly with an overview at October 14th. We reviewed some more on October 12th with some additional information. And at that time, we had no conclusion, so we scheduled this meeting to review the fiscal year 2025 draft budget. You'll see on the cover page, it does show that the deadlines are the public hearing on the 15th. And we have to have the 7 or 8 days. It has to be in the paper that Monday, December 2nd.
It's only an electronic version, so we should try to bump it back.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So this kind of left just this week for this window of opportunity. And of course, we will all be here Thursday for a special meeting with Acme Township. Let's see, the additional materials, the questions that were asked that I put the information in was the election hours and wage by category. That report is in your packet, and also the revenue and expense with details for departments 215 and 262. And then the second item was just the earlier packet from November 12th. So with that, I'll open it up for any comments or questions regarding this. And again, one of the items to note, the only changes from the October meeting to the November meeting, let me find that cover page, were outlined on the cover. And that was the grant revenue increase of 40,000 that needed to go in there from the TART reimbursement, the 5% COLA or 2.5% industry adjustment, and 2.5% COLA, for a total of 5% adjustment for the 2 deputies, 20,000 for the server transition to the cloud, a movement from 621, which was the zoning ordinance amendment fund for a consultant, to move that into the 702. And then, as you'll recall, in October, I gave you a balanced budget, revenues equaled expenditures. But in order to do that, the most effective, quickest way to do that was the two of the items in the Parks Commission was the Grace McDonald Park improvements that they were looking at for 300,000, which was over 3 projects. And the Arbutus Lake number 5, phase 2, which was some little benches and park play equipment off to the side there. So that is what was the difference between October and November. And then as well for the November meeting, then you had the additional items from the 217 and the 262. So with that, we will open up for any questions or comments regarding the budget for fiscal year 2025.
So,
Mindy.
looking on page 13 of 155 of the packet, we're talking about the actual hours billed in 2024 with the 3 elections that we had. And we're talking about adding a full-time person, and they would be, I assume, in the election assistant category?
Correct.
And do we have a job description for that
Not
elected?
yet, and I don't have anyone in mind yet either, but when I initially offered it, it would be that there would be, it would be a posted position at that time, but there's bits and pieces that I've received from other entities, but no, I don't have one at this point.
I think that is one of the concerns, that we don't have a full job description and the tasks. And I look at what was used by that category, and maybe it should be more than just that category, but in the totals for 2024. And I assume that if there are additional hours, they're going to be minimal in 2024.
Well, and part of that is the individuals that, their availability. We would have used someone more hours. We did get 2 persons certified. They both have other jobs, but they were able to have some hours with us. Was it enough? It wasn't, but it's what we had. And it didn't make sense to certify another person to do the qualified voter file and try to fit in those spaces. And besides, we were busy running the elections. So we had 1 at first, and then we had 2 for the November election.
And they both qualify under this election assistant line item?
They
of
do.
the
And we
600?
have one other one that is under there as well, the former chairperson for the absentee counting board. They don't have QVF, but they were very instrumental in keeping things organized, reports pulled, applications filed correctly so that we could stay on top of things.
But all 3 of them
All
are on
3 of
that
them.
664.57 hours?
Correct.
And between when this report was pulled and the end of the year, do you anticipate them to be working any more hours?
They have been working more hours. They received some pay when we did the payroll today, and I have asked them both to give me at least a day, 2 days a week through the end, if possible, the end of the year, only because of their availability.
Okay.
So I've
There
got,
is work to do, it's just getting them the available time for them to help.
Okay, so if we add an additional 16 hours a week for the next 6 weeks, we're still, it gives us a good idea of the total numbers that were worked by these election assistants in 2024. And then you take those numbers and you take all those additional hours that were worked by you and Holly that are not necessarily recorded on, because they're salaried hours,
Right.
right? To me, you take those hours, and we know that next year's not an election year, unless there's some special election for something, right? And then when I look at that, and I divide it by the 52 weeks, and I find that we could hire someone at 2 days a week for the year, and see how that goes. And I propose that person work as I'll call it casual on-call basis, where 1 week they might not work, and the next week they might work 40 hours. So that it allows us the flexibility, if there is a special election, to use them, for the 2 or 3 months ahead of the election a lot, and then later on in the year not use them so much. And that's kind of what I seeing for that person. I see that I am kind of wanting to see that job description, and I know it's late in the game and we need to get this finalized, but I really would like to see that person is really working on elections only.
Right.
And not working on other things for the clerk's office. So,
Oh, that's definite. That would be the only thing. It would be a different job title for one. But there is always election maintenance all the time.
exactly, and I'm not saying that,
Right. And
I think that it, because as we discussed before, if you, in my line of work, if you need to hire somebody else, you kind of have to prove it, right? That you need that person.
Sure.
And that's kind of what I'm seeing is that if we take those hours, and an election year, and next year we're not going to have one, we can figure out, did this work in 2025, in a non-election year, and what do we need to do in an election year to make it work even better? Because, no, it doesn't, it's not fair that you're working 80 hours for 6 weeks. But I do see that in our budget for 2024, we did have an additional, lots of hours that we could have hired people if they were available. So I want this position, because I don't want you working those hours. I don't think Holly should be working those hours. And I think we should get this election assistant, whatever their title may be, and get them in to help the elections office.
so the envisioning that we have is they would be certified enough to help with training. So those multiple nights a week, back to back to back, they are also certified. They've gone through all the extensive training to do that as well. It does concern me that we would have someone that would have that availability on a temporary part-time scheduling, and have that confidence and that ability to do the training, to train people. I understand where you're coming from. I think had we known we were going to get into something this massive with the election, we would have fought earlier for more help at that point in time. But by the time we got through February, which the 9 days wasn't crazy, it was very low turnout, although it's still statutory that we have to hold it, and the training of all those inspectors, plus the certification, the biannual certification before the August election that takes care of them for 2 years. Had, at that point, we known about it, we would have tried to come to the board for more hours. As it was, we did come to the supervisor and say, we need to have a second person put on that was able to have the capability to go through that online 40-plus hours to get certified for the minimum use of the qualified voter file. I guess.
So let's be clear,
Wishes
when you
were-
said you went to the supervisor, that
For
was the
email.
memo,
Yeah,
the email
just
that
for
went to
an
the
email.
full
Sorry.
board?
Thanks, I did not finish
Okay.
that thought
Thanks.
correctly. So she was able to grant them an email user account so that they could, with the state of Michigan, go through some of the training online and not have to go to Lansing to do that training. So then they could help issue ballots, they could help return them back in, so that when they were both here, we had 4 of us on the computers doing that to stay above water. But they, like I say, they were both also, and they are both also employed elsewhere. I don't know if that would work long-term for them or for someone else. I don't even know I haven't even approached anyone that we've currently had in there.
Well, and that is a problem because of the fact that we can't post it right now because we don't have a job description. We don't have, so
Understood.
I think that I think that because next year is a non-voting year, that we have a year to make sure that it works before we have, that's not right. It's not a non-voting year. The potential of a non-voting year, there's still potential for some
Right.
special elections, and I don't want to disregard that. But I think that it gives us time to figure out what that maintenance level really is, especially with our expanding population, with the developments that are going on, so that we have that baseline, and then we can figure out for the budget of 2026 what that person looks like. Because we do have this, even in odd years where the elections are not as significant of a load to the clerk's office.
If I could, regarding the job description, on page 141 of your packet, they do outline the description for an election assistant of the possibilities of voter registration, QVF file maintenance, candidate and local proposal petition filings, publishing and posting elections, absentee voter process, the military and overseas voters, the ballot proofing, preparation of the equipment, election day issues, including the early voting days, and the closing the polls in the precinct canvases. The ones that would be of all of these, in total, there are 4 that would happen in off years, so to speak, and that would be the voter registration, the QVF maintenance, the absentee voter list, and any military and overseas voters with respect to registration and absentee voter list. So that's some clarification, at least, on things that they would, the 4 items that they would be able to work on. And regarding the growth, I did take a look at the 2020 registered voters versus 2022 and 2024. So I think you mentioned we were at 10,710 for 2024. 2020, we were at 10,196. Between 2020 and 2022, we increased 1.6% to 10,364. And then between 2022 and 2024, we increased 3.3% to the 10,710. The ballots cast, well, I didn't have them in 2022. Looking from the 2020 to the 2024, the ballots cast actually increased just by about the same amount at 5.2%.
Right. Well, at the beginning of this year, when we did the mutual agreement with the other townships, we were at 10,005.
10,005. So 10,005?
500.
Oh, 10,500, yes, okay. So that would have been part of that 3.3% increase from 2022 to 2024. Because in 2022, you were at 10,364, and then presumably, as of when you wrote your report, you were at 10,710, so. On the 9 days of early voting, having it at our township with the other townships was an elective decision by the board to do that. Have we leveraged the help of the other township clerks in conducting the training? And
Well, we have to the best we could. They are looking to be more involved, and they each took days in the precinct, that the ones that weren't on the ballot or their deputies did, so that we could do more of just the registering and the other ongoing duties that needed to be done. Holly still needed to prepare all of the inspector sign-ins, get them into the computer, get them ready every morning, because each is a unique user sign-in. And also to help with the closing, because those other jurisdictions don't have the equipment. We're trying to get them more hands-on, but usually the download is only just days before the training starts and early voting starts. They don't allow a lot of time.
yeah, well, I think that's good to leverage those other clerks, because they will be, have the training as well and be able to offer training, and that will assist as well. So that's good to hear. The current budget that is presented to you does have in the 262, it has 10,000 for a part-time person.
The
And
remaining grant money that I received of that 18,000.
in next year,
Correct.
yep. So that, that is in your budget in the 262. Hold on, let me find that page real quick.
55.
55. Thank you. Okay, so there is a $10,000 in there, and if you took the rate increased by COLA for this year of the clerk's assistant, and that can be found in the one table. If you took that and multiplied it by 10 hours a week, overall 52 weeks, so 520 hours in a year, you come just about at $12,000. I have that on a note. Let me find that. And we would be able to cover that in the budget. We could also adjust that $10,000 number for that amount. Yes, here it is. 10 hours at 52 weeks by 2340, which is the increased amount, is $12,168. So there's 10,000 in there. So really, you'd, with the FICA, you would also probably want to increase. It's at 10,815. You'd probably want to add about 2,500 between those two numbers.
You're looking at 10 hours instead of the 16 hours that Mindy's discussing.
I just picked 10 hours, round number, 25, 52 weeks, and just did a quick calculation. And I did have the deputies, both for the treasurer's office and the clerk's office, and I think you remember this, Matt, it was at 2.5% COLA, 2.5% industry.
And is there a reason why, I mean, the two of them, the positions, the people filling those positions have both done exceptional work this year, covering the front, doing all the other asks. Is there a reason why that's 2.5 and not 5?
Well, I looked at it when I did some of the others, the 2.5 was performance and 2.5 was industry adjustment.
I guess I would just
And
have
then-
expected that performance-wise, it would be relative to the other departments that received it for that reason.
Yeah, I looked more at outcomes in the departments and less at hours. So, and looked at the industry too. So, was looking at, and that was beyond elections as well, so.
Oh, and that's why I say both, because I know both of them have done exceptional, and I would think that would be rewarded. I do believe 10 hours is not enough. I would think 2 days is still not enough, but it's better than 10 hours. And to be reevaluated as we go through the year.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got to start somewhere. It's a whole lot easier to add more hours, especially in an off year, than it is to take them away from somebody. So if you have somebody that's hired in at 20 hours and then you reduce it to 10 hours, that's really hard. But if you have a 10-hour and you need to go up, usually that's more acceptable to people. So
Sure.
that's kind of how it's the Paul's toothpaste thing, you know. You can't put it back in the tube once you got it out, so.
That was years ago. We'll never forget that one. It was a pretty good analogy. But that, I understand the point that you're making. And similarly, like with the full-time position at 52, that doesn't include the $30,000 to $33,000 wasn't added in there for the benefits that we would incur as well with that too, so.
Well, since we're talking give and take, I would respectfully ask that we do 2 full days instead of 10 hours, and at least get that going into the budget for that amount.
You know, I hear what you're saying. I would say perhaps getting the part-time
Job description.
job description, and maybe even posting it and see where you're at, because you may find, the 2 full days a week here, they're a very long day. And you may find that the perfect employee is someone who has kids in the school right across the street.
understood.
And can do 2 days from 8 to 4 or
Or we
3.
could do 4 days for 5 hours.
Sure.
But I don't know that 10 hours is going to be an attractive amount, nor one that, I don't know if it would be as helpful as it should be.
I'm 1 of 7.
Did you think about being able to use the reception person to do some of your stuff? Because we have talked in the past about trying to put someone out there, at least part-time or partial days, to help when it's so busy. And could they do some of that?
I wouldn't
think-
have them be the qualified voter file qualified. I would think they could answer general questions. I mean, that was always helpful when we had a reception desk. If we had, residents that we were trying to register and someone had a quick question, by all means. But I would not, I don't feel comfortable having that program out on a computer that's out in the lobby. It should be something that is in the room.
And it's only, the work that they're doing is only on the computer?
No, they're also filing, which is in the office, so that would take them away from the reception desk. They'd be doing the voter maintenance.
Did you have any other questions?
I have concerns about starting with a full-time person when we haven't tried a part-time person. I think you can get a bigger bang for your buck with a part-time, because we don't have all the benefits that we have to pay for on top of their salary. And I think then if you find that you need additional help, you can get another part-time person, and you could get 2 people for the same dollar, actually less, because you don't have benefits. So, I mean, I kind of like Mindy's idea of starting with a part-time person and seeing how that goes, and move that, and see what would work best, move that up if we need to.
I know when you had originally mentioned somebody as well working into elections in the year, I had asked you how much or and how long, and you said probably to help clean up the files for the first quarter, maybe into the second quarter. Was there a rationale between when you mentioned that to going to year-round?
I can appreciate that. I think you and I have had the discussion that we both wish that we weren't so busy, that we could have sat down and had a better discussion, and maybe that would have been something that would have come through a little better. I was looking at the money that we already had as a grant money, and to try to stretch that out as long as we could. That I didn't want to see it all front-loaded and still, so that 10,000 was used in the first month, or 2 months. I wanted to have it more for our needs, but I wasn't looking at additional dollars in the budget at that point. You and I were talking about that grant. And so that's where I said, let's make sure that we've got 6 months, and I'll try to make adjustments within that without adding to the budget. But at that point in time, it was a comment that we made, and we both went off onto the work that we have to get done without having pen to paper or those discussions to see what that looked like. It is ongoing. It's all the time. As MTA says, as MAMC says, as we've all been feeling, it is an all the time. There's always registrations, there's always moves, there's always changes. Those things happen all the time.
True, and there's a lot of it that always was, always
Well, of
happening,
course.
sure.
So that $10,000 grant that goes through May 31st, that all tied into where I said 6 months. Not necessarily trying to factor in how many weeks, how many
Okay.
hours. that
Understood.
10,000 would have.
Understood. Matt, I know you were unable to make it to the earlier budget meeting. Nope. Just wanted to see if you had questions in particular, but also outside of the 217 and the 262.
No other specific questions about the budget. And maybe this is Sue, maybe you can educate me a little bit on, I'm assuming that the activity that we're talking about, all the additional work associated with the voting years especially, the election years, there has to be a minimum threshold of work. Let's just say we were a township with 5 registered voters. There's going to be a minimum amount of, a baseline of work that would have to be done for 5 or 10,000, right?
Okay.
I would like to understand, if we're talking about adding headcount, even at part-time, is there, based on some other larger townships in the state, a threshold that you get to? Because I'm assuming a lot of the stuff we're talking about, numbers of registered voters, I know we're doing the early voting location for other townships as well, so there's some additional burden there. But is there a general idea of a threshold of amount of registered voters that would support a full-time elections person?
Wouldn't that be lovely?
I didn't know. I mean, I know there's other larger townships in the state, so I don't know how they operate.
Now, we have a number of smaller townships here in our county that utilize additional full-time staff above and beyond the clerk and deputy. Peninsula Township has 3, so they've got 5. Garfield has more. Acme pulls in their former deputy clerk that's in planning and zoning to also come in and work elections in there with them. There are others that do that, that have that. Is there a tried and true? No.
Okay.
Is there the growth and expansions in some of those other jurisdictions like we're seeing here? Some maybe. Some, some of the relationships that I have with township clerks throughout the state, they all take a lot of the burden on themselves, but then they're not available to do the other things in the office. And they're all working to exhaustion. There was 118 vacancies, 118 different jurisdictions that had no clerk run for office this year. So they are trying to appoint someone to fill that right now, and it's getting larger. There were several more, one even here in our county that's done. They ran and they're not taking the oath, they're done. It's too much work. You don't have that from me. I don't give up that easy. I'm going to keep working in no matter what. But, some of them, they move more to an advisory the larger they get. They still have the staffing. They probably have more staffing. Some that have maybe 10,000 more than we do, so double the size. They have 6 in the office, all in different various forms.
You were talking during the election cycle.
No, they have that many staff members, but they're not an election assistant. They use them in many different ways.
Sure.
But they can
For-
all pull into elections. That's why I say there's no comparison.
Yeah, so for example, we have an accountant who does some of the things that would normally be a statutory duty, so those are done, the reconciliation of accounts, the helping with those types of things, sure. Yep.
I mean, I can say the same thing with the treasurer's office. There are lots of offices that have multiple people in there aside from the treasurer and the
Of
clerk.
course.
Or the treasurer and the deputy. So it just depends on how they run their office. We tend to run as thinly as
Lean.
possible.
Lean.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Lean,
As
yes.
possible. At least that's been, the history since I've been here, but yeah. I mean, I think we have seen the need, and it trickles down. I mean, the same growth that Sue's feeling, I'm feeling, because they pay taxes too, so.
Right.
But, it starts at the planning, with all them coming in and building and that, and then, or the developers, and then it trickles down to the everyday services that we offer, so.
And you may not feel those effects for several years until it's built out. I mean, that's, I think, why we're seeing so much with Bayview right now, is because they do have occupancy.
Well, in our area has seen growth, although I will say on the east side, Acme and East Bay have seen less than Long Lake and Garfield and Blair. And we saw those in the census numbers as well.
The other thing I was just curious about, now this probably goes too far back for anybody here to remember it, even in rough numbers off the top of your head, but, the election landscape, I'm guessing you can attest, has changed dramatically since, pre-2020.
I've been here since 2006, yes.
With COVID and everything that kind of happened with some of the changes in legislatively and,
Yep, and the 9 days of early voting for all state and federal elections. It's not an if you want to.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm, in the recent past, let's just say going back to 2020, since I've lived here, since 2020, there's been significant changes to both I guess.
Go back 2 more years, Matt. In 2018, November of 2018, the citizens voted in no reason absentee. Before that, there were 7 reasons, 7 ways you could get an absentee ballot. Most of those folks, they had to be a senior citizen to get one, or they needed to say that they were out of the community. The citizens changed that with a citizen-driven petition that became a proposal on the ballot in 2018 of November. That passage opened that up for anybody that wanted an
Right.
absentee ballot. That immediate growth was felt with the 2020 election. COVID expanded on that quite a bit. But then in 2022, another citizen initiative that changed how the flavor, how the landscape looks now, is that we performed 30 elections this year. Each of those 9 days before the regular election is an election.
Right.
You still have to open, you still have to provide oaths, you still have to train, you still have to close, you still have to put everything under lock and seal. Each and every day. You don't get an option to not do it.
Right.
So right as soon as you're done with that 9th day, the next day, you're preparing, you're downloading programs after 4 o'clock, after registering more people or doing whatever that process is, setting up the precincts, getting all of that done. If the clerk's office is lucky, they're home by midnight, and then turn around back again at 5 o'clock to be here for the inspectors that get here at 6, take the oath and start all over again. So that's where the 10 full elections happen, or days of each election.
Well, that doesn't happen every day of the 9 days, though. There's not midnight days on the 9 days of elections.
Each day, your early voting is 9 days.
No, I understand the early voting's 9 days, but you're not here till midnight on those 9 days.
No, most of
Yeah.
them, and if we were not training, we were leaving by 6:30,
Yeah, right, right.
maybe.
Yep.
But on the nights that we were training and getting everything ready, a lot of times we took work home with us because we had to have the ability to have our best foot forward for the residents as well. So we may not have been here, but we would be working from home, taking the computers home, doing things that way. That was a hard one for all of us. I don't think anybody realized the magnitude of what the voters voted in. I don't think the voters knew what they voted.
Well, there's been comments of that, for sure. So I think one thing, moving forward, we should be cautious about what we engage in that we don't necessarily have to do. So, like, hindsight's always 20/20, but did the numbers say, did we still fall under the thresholds where we could still be 4 precincts instead of 5, so we don't have an additional place to travel to?
That is one of the things
Which-
we're considering with the changes of legislature
Right,
from.
to go back to 4.
2,999.
Yeah.
Now 4,999.
Yeah.
But there wasn't time to do that from when it was passed last December to when it had to be done in January.
And-
notice the voters.
And then, like, the second example would be, do we undertake being the geographical for the east side? Not all of the east side does that. There are some who still do their own. So do we undertake that, especially if we don't have those clerks fully engaged? I'm glad to hear that they'll be utilized.
We still had
More.
2,069 voters of East Bay voters attend for the November election.
Sure.
By far, the biggest part of that piece. And that's not going to go away now that they know it. It's not going to go away.
Sure. I remember when we used to have lines like crazy, when you didn't have those opportunities to either early vote or absentee vote, when everyone was going through on the same day, except for the people who had those 7 exceptions. But I do think Tracy's point is maybe the larger conversation is how we are changing as a township, because I think Tracy's point of, we could say very similar for all the offices. I know, I could say the same for supervisor too. Water, sewer, MPO, emergency services, we didn't used to operate across the entire district. All of those things. So I think that we all do take on more. But with that, I did want to get back to the question of, because I think it was significant with the Parks Commission request of the 300,000 for Grace McDonald and the 125 for the Phase 2. Again, having first given you a balanced budget of revenue and expenditures, but now including that so you can see the difference. What is the pleasure of the board in including that or a portion of that? The projects that they were doing, for some context, the projects that they were doing for the Grace McDonald Park, let me see if I can serve these from memory, is the cornhole game area, which adds a significant amount of sidewalk to make the park more accessible. It also included the resurfacing or changing the extra field that's in that back corner to either a dog park or to resurfacing it so it brings it up to a suitable grade for using it as a field. And then the other thing was the pavilion, is altering that pavilion to be able to use as almost like during a fourth season with the flaps on the side and the heaters and internal of it. And then, so those are the 3 projects under Grace McDonald Park. That was the 300,000. And then for Arbutus Phase 2, it was when you drive in the parking lot, that north side. It's not really changing like the vegetation that's over there or the wetland area over there. I don't know if,
Back in where the old dock was, on that part of it?
Not right where the dock was, because that's like the little beachy area right there at the end of the seawall. This is more where the play equipment was and the slide and so forth.
Boys are there.
Yeah.
So on the north side of the springs, the creek. that
Parking
runs
lot,
there.
yeah, the parking lot. So north side of the parking lot. So that would have some play equipment structures, not huge like the 2 at Grace, but smaller, maybe either a small piece or a couple individual pieces. But the park equipment is very expensive. And then picnic tables, that sort of thing, improvements there. So I didn't know, do you want to leave it in, take it out, or put some portion of it in?
Is there any documentation that shows where there's bids to do, or even drawings of what they want to do?
So we've been, with Arbutus, they have some preliminary phase drawings from a landscape architect. They do not plan on doing as extensive as one that they showed them they could do, so they were looking at scaling it back. We've talked with engineer and park suppliers of materials to kind of get a general idea, and that's where we came up with the 125 for Arbutus. The Grace McDonald, the cornhole area is based off of an estimate from the landscape engineers who designed it through Wade Trim. The pavilion area is just taking a look at, what we would be needing and trying to factor what those are, like the heaters, and seeing what those would be. So that one is a guess, but we've used it researching online, like what they tend to be. As also, we've talked with 2 different places that have pavilions that have done that to make sure, like, well, what did you do to have it function in that way? So we were looking at what we needed for that. And then for the dog park, that was just researching online.
I guess I would like to see, rather than put money into the park commission for those line items, we've got it in fund balance. Get some drawings exactly so we know pretty close what we're looking at for money, and then bring it back to the board and go from there. Just to throw money in and say, well, we want to do this, but we're not sure what it's going to cost, but we'll make sure we got enough money in there.
Yeah, I understand your point, and I think it's a very good point. I don't want you to perceive that it was willy-nilly and how they came about this. I'll tell you why it wasn't. This was them looking at their 5-year Parks and Rec plan, which they completed last year, as well as them taking a look at the master plan and where they are with the different parks. But I understand your point
Yeah,
as well.
this way the money's in there for it, but at least we got some kind of documentation, what
Sure,
we're gonna
they
do.
can be done, so if what I hear, what you're saying, your preference is you're not saying not to do the project, you're saying
No.
to come back as a budget amendment for it.
Right.
And that's a possibility as well.
No, I totally agree with Glenn that I don't see it as a line item in the budget. It's just when they get the project ready and they've gone out for the grants that they can get, and if they need extra money, they come back to us. And we have plenty of money in fund balance just to fund it. And it shouldn't really be in the budget. The budget should be zero balance.
Well, then that's the first one I gave you, again, to show you the difference in what the parks, but that's also an elected Parks Commission, and I wanted to show you what they had passed to put in their budget. So, we, like I said, that works as well. We can communicate to them, hey, it's not that those aren't worthwhile projects, but bring it with a thing. And a couple of those do have grants going on. We'll hear about one of them, 2 of them in December, I believe. Were you just going to say something
One
else?
question, when you mentioned the cornhole board or spaces.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's ever went up to Timber Ridge and looked at what they got up there for being into an open space where everybody and their brother can walk up to it. It's probably the best setup I've ever imagined even. There's nobody gonna move them, and nobody gonna ruin them, and the weather's not gonna affect them. I mean, they're concrete with some kind of coating put
That's
over
what
it.
these are, concrete, yep.
Yeah.
We have it designed so that, while not knowing how much the project would be, they have 2 different options. They can put in part of it now enough to get 2 games going with the place for additional games, or if we were to get the grant and able to do it all at once, it puts in all the games at once, and it's large enough for tournaments then. Either way, it would be
Yeah.
large enough for tournaments.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Parks Commission money and leaving that in or out or a portion of?
I would agree with the thought process. Do we need to have, do we need to budget anything for the engineering if they're going to bring an actual plan to the board? Does there need to be money carried in there for?
So I believe that we do have, let me take a look at that 770 really quick when you ask that question. If you see the page number, go ahead and shout it.
They have 10,000 contract services.
Well, and I
What that's for.
think they may have,
Oh, I say 12 for engineer grant
Oh,
fees.
yeah.
yeah, so they have, let's see. The 12,000 was for engineering and planning consulting as needed. The additional 10,000, I think, was project-specific, so there's money in there. They've got, between the two, about 22,000 for consultants and so forth. And again, we've brought that, you remember, to staff it, we used a consultant, and we're bringing that in-house, so.
So that should be more than enough to get something shovel-ready for the board.
I would think so, but I'm always surprised at
Yeah.
how much that adds up to be, for sure. So with that, is what I'm hearing, to remove the 300,000 to what was originally in the budget in October, which was 0 for the Grace McDonald Park area, and then 0 as well for the, that first one was 973.753, and the second one would be 0 for the 973.754. Then with communication to the Parks Commission that, again, not to necessarily help those projects, but just to gather the information, have them make a recommendation, and then do it through budget amendments. Okay? We can most certainly do that. Let's see, and we also had, I guess with that, we did have a motion last time, and that was tied, so it failed. I'll take a crack at making a motion with this and move forward. Yes? Did you have other questions or comments on the budget?
I do. The one thing that wasn't addressed tonight is that there was a request by the clerk for an increase in her wages and the deputy's wages. I should say the office of the clerk, not the individual. And that hasn't been addressed. If you read the packet, especially from the MTA, and it clearly states that due to the change in the election laws, their job description has changed. It isn't just an increase in the number of voters, it isn't just an increase in a few things here and there. It is totally changed. And it's obviously what she said, what they presented here. 800 hours over 3/4 of the year, that's like adding 50% to the job. And it really needs to have some serious consideration. Other townships have done it, quite a few other townships are doing this. And I think it needs to be considered. The way I look at it, and I know some people might laugh and think it's silly, but when we get elected, we are basically elected to a 4-year term. And that 4-year term is more or less a contract. And yes, the workload in the 2 heavy election years is more than the off years, but you can't adjust their salary up and down according to state law. That's what it says here in that. So the way I look at it, it was 5 major elections, 5 elections during that 4-year period. And if they're working well over 200 hours per election, then you should take that into consideration and take the pay rate times the 1,000 hours, and that's what it should be. That is not the request. The request is for a lot less than that. And I don't know why there's such a backlash against it. I really don't. I know I'm closely related to it, and some of you think that way, but and I'm going to say this, and I hope it doesn't upset the old editor, but in this budget, there were 2 part-time positions added with not a question from anyone. Not a one. There's $10,000 in there for an intern to record the history of the township. That's not statutory. In fact, as it says right here, administering elections is one of the primary statutory duties of the clerk. The township clerk is compensated for anything to do with the clerk's statutory duties of election administration through the salary of the office of the clerk. So a township clerk cannot be paid additionally over and above the salary of the office for administering elections. But the salary can be increased following the correct legal steps to individual townships. There is no extra payment to the clerk per election for election reimbursement. So if you don't raise their salaries on an annual, as a part of the, I can't think of the name, anyway, now, it doesn't happen. Is it fair? I'm seriously, we've all had jobs. If you were at a job and all of a sudden your boss come along and told you, look it, I know you've been working 40 hours a week, but we want you to work 60 hours a week now, and we don't want to pay you anything extra. That's what's happened. That's truly what's happened. And yet, I don't hear any conversation about it. I'm really confused about that. I'm willing to compromise and talk and do whatever, but there's all this concern about elections as a statutory duty, and oh boy, we can't do this, we can't do that, no, we don't want to do that, we don't want to do this. But by golly, we can hire someone to come in and, do the website, and do social media, no questions asked. We have an office manager spot in there. Sorry, my mouth is dry. An office manager's job in there with, what office are they managing? It's just another clerical job. It's been mentioned here too, there were raises given on performance, but Lord, where I said, the performance of what the clerk and the deputy did in this last time, their performance is out of this world. It's out of this world. Ask people. Minnie knows a little bit because she has worked elections. You've never worked an election, And I do think it warrants at least some discussion, and I would like to hear why, yes or no, that you feel the way you do. It's that simple.
I do want to, did you have any other comments?
That'll do for now.
So I did want to address the question regarding the 2 part-time positions that are in the budget. As you're aware, we had a full-time office manager who unfortunately passed. And in replacing that, instead of a full-time office manager, I'm looking at breaking that position up into 2 areas and hiring on a part-time basis. This will save us in the benefits, and it will allow us to expand the expertise in those 2 areas. The office manager that is up front there, we do have flexibility with what they do, which I think is probably what Tracy was trying to get at with, can they do some of the rotate or ritualistic type of election items that were on that earlier thing we talked about for the clerk's assistant. And then the other one is to expand social media. It's not just social media, but it is communication of the township and getting that word out in a productive and transparent way. And I think that will be beneficial to the township and as we change how we communicate with our public. So those were regarding those 2 positions.
Just to go back to what Mindy questioned, is there a actual job description for those?
No, as I said in the earlier meeting, that I put the amount in there and I would be bringing back those job descriptions at that time. And I mentioned that at the previous meeting. We do have a job description for a full-time office manager. That's, you have already seen that and approved that. Any other comments, questions, or a motion?
What was the motion last time?
Well, it was to move to proceed with the 2025 budget to a public hearing in December with the totals printed for the meeting with the new rates for the lighting SAD. And in order to do something similar, I would also add that we would add $2,500 to the 262 department to bump that election assistant up a bit, and also remove the $300,000 and the $125,000 for the parks projects.
I'd make that motion.
Motion is made by Lyle. Is there support? Okay, motion is made by Lyle and supported by Bartlett. Is there further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by no?
No.
We'll do a roll call, Ann.
Sure, Bartlett,
Yes.
Lyle,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
Escortade,
No.
Matt Cook,
Yes.
and Matt Cortade,
No.
Do I get a vote?
and Friend.
Yes. Okay, I appreciate everybody's deliberation and focus on this, and I am sure that Sue does as well. With that, do we have any public comment at this time? Okay, seeing no public comment, our upcoming meeting is actually this Thursday, and it will be a joint meeting with Acme Township, and the focus will be on the sewer station. In particular, we'll be bringing everybody up to date on that project, and also going through the funding and how we will be implementing that over the project phases.
Okay, now,
So-
well, we'll talk about it then. I have
Okay.
a couple questions.
Okay.
No sense getting into it now.
All right, that sounds very good. If there are no objections, then we stand adjourned. Everyone have a good evening. I think they are looking for you in the book, because I saw someone come.